Okay, the last podcast was over 15 minutes. This should be shorter. This is on the early warnings for all initiative logic model. So there are some top rubrics here. Oops. Alignment has to happen between climate action, Sendai framework, Agenda 2030, and intermediary outcomes, and impact. Okay, there's a lot of details here. I may not read all of them. So you have inputs and activities, outputs feeding into intermediary outcomes and leading to outcomes and measurable impacts. That's what we are talking about. So this table is massive and I have chopped it into pieces to be presentable. So we are again looking at inputs, funding, technical assistance, technology, networks and partnerships, and activities as per pillar implementation plans, and we already talked about the pillars, of course. So you have the outputs with here we have pillars and the cross-cutting as well. So here underneath you have sphere of control and accountability and sphere of influence. So try to stay in this space. Sorry, I have to flip back and forth. What are the outputs? Under pillar 1, just to remind ourselves, oops, I have jumped somehow ahead, so I have to go back and redo that. So pillar 1, disaster risk knowledge. Pillar 2, detection, observation, monitoring, warning, dissemination, communication, preparedness. So risk knowledge, detection, warning, dissemination, and preparedness to respond. Just remember those top lines. So let's start this again. EW4ALL initiative, the early warnings for all executive action plan set out a series of activities for year 1, which was 2023. So we are just starting with different activities and outcomes set for each pillar. The progress that has been made within and across the pillars is highlighted in this section already. The report just came out. I'm recording this in September 2024, so that's pretty rapid progress. Key accomplishments include the development of a programmatic approach, rollout of national workshops, conducting gap analysis to inform national MUSE roadmaps, and the development of global guidelines on MUSE multi-hazard early warning systems. The principles then: people-focused, accountability, inclusiveness, collaboration and integration, multi-hazard and multifunctional, relevant and contextual, and of course you need technology, innovation and forward-looking, and sustainability as the principles. Now we are here. I already read a lot of it. So risk knowledge, detection, communication and preparedness. So risk knowledge production, access, application, M&E governance, I won't go into all those. Capacity to detect, early warning, dissemination, national, local government and community preparedness, and legislation, increased political awareness, support, coordinated action, resources available, and maturity index are seen as cross-cutting across all these. And this table has other details here like intermediary outcomes. So countries have a minimum capability to produce quality, timely and relevant risk information with the participation of vulnerable communities. Engaging communities becomes very critical to co-produce early warnings so that they are really used and made usable by feedbacks from the communities. Okay, so these are the different pillars and outcomes. All countries produce and use risk information that informs and strengthens MUSE, resulting in actionable and risk-informed warnings and targeted responses. And under pillar 2, detection, empower countries to monitor and forecast priority hazards as well as generate, disseminate and use impact-based actionable early warnings to save lives, protect property and livelihoods. Under dissemination, all countries ensure that clear and understandable alerting messages reach all those at risk, allowing them to take the necessary actions to save lives, livelihoods and to support longer term resilience. So you don't want to be in a crisis mode or crisis management mode all the time. You want the early warnings to also help people think of resilience, build resilience, work towards resilience, incentivize resilience, have decadal forecasts to plan, strategize policies for resilience, right? And in the pillar 4, which was what was it? Strengthened preparedness to respond at all levels leads to prevention or mitigation of the impacts of hazards and crises, including climate-related events. The cross-cutting theme, enabling environment in place so that all the ecosystems are working together, all the pillars are coming together to actually enable people and the system to deal with hazards that are evolving, and risks have to be measurably reduced as well. Resilience has to be measurably improved, right? Finally, the impact, ensure that everyone on Earth is protected from hazardous weather, water, or climate events through life-saving early warning systems. So it's a good initiative, and there are other initiatives on early warnings, early action that we'll come back and read in the next chapter. So early warnings for all basically, is consistent with the principle that we are now all connected. The global system, mitigation leadership emerges easily because it's about mostly monitoring CO2, even though other greenhouse gases also have to be monitored, and reducing CO2 emissions and reducing emitted CO2 from the system are two main goals. So, renewable energies, efficiencies, EVs, and so on, plus carbon capture and sequestration, bioenergy, and so on. Then the main message there, of course, is that lots of negotiations, a lot of action, and yet the CO2 emissions haven't peaked yet. Greenhouse gas emissions haven't peaked yet. So global leadership on mitigation emerges easily. Each country has submitted, or many countries, most countries have submitted nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. They have revised them to get closer to the global warming targets of 1.5 degrees C and 2 degrees C by 2100 and so on. But adaptation and early warnings are hyper local. What happens in your neighborhood because of global warming, or what gets exacerbated by global warming in your backyard, has to be dealt with at these time scales of managing crisis as things happen and building resilience for the coming years and decades. So this is not so easy to have global leadership, but organizations like the UNDRR and UNDP and WMO can build networks and Sendai frameworks and so on to have coordinated early warnings, protocols, observation networks, early warnings for all, and so on. So these are critical, and again, the entire system is only as resilient as the least resilient country. So you want to carry everybody along, and each country is only as resilient as each corner of its land or ocean, right? So country like India or China has to be resilient in every place, every village, every community, every business, and it's their dependence on things coming from outside, whether it's energy or grains or products, resources like raw materials. Everybody is connected in every possible way. So early warnings for all is actually good for the global economy, and the Global Commission on Adaptation put out a report few years ago, calculating the numbers for investments needed in early warnings and the return you would get in by 2050, and the returns are order 10, which means if you invest the required amount, which is I think around 0.1 trillion, but you can look it up, I have podcasts, the return will be 1 trillion. So this is a no-brainer in terms of investing in forecasting systems, monitoring systems, observation systems, preparedness, capacity building, and dissemination and communication, right? So let's come back and talk next about the initiatives on early warning, early action. It's not enough to just build early warnings. We also need to train people, have the link from forecasters to people on the street so that they can respond to early warnings with early actions to mitigate the impacts of hazards which are unavoidable, right? Adaptation is about managing the unavoidable. Mitigation is about trying to avoid the unmanageable from happening. So let's leave this here, okay?